So I have my subwoofer box and amp rack installed, I've made the false floor beauty panel, but now in this video I'm going to build the piece that interfaces between the subwoofer box and the false floor. How do I make this huge chamfer? How do I cut the acrylic that I'll be attaching? And how am I going to mount everything together? I'm Mark, and in this video build log, I'm going to show you guys step by step. That's because here on this channel, I do videos like this one. I also do review videos, and I do videos teaching you guys different car audio topics. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. Without further ado, let's jump on in. So in the last video, I completely covered this whole trunk area. I covered the subwoofer enclosure and the custom amplifier rack up there, and I matched the sides of the trunk. Now, I know this is going to seem kind of backwards because in this video, I've pulled that all out and I'm going to start making the stuff that sits underneath of it. I know this is kind of a strange order in which to do things, but I kind of wanted to plan a few steps ahead, and that's why I made that top surface first. And now I'm going to be going back and making the different things that will interface between my mounting surfaces here in the trunk and that actual top surface. After all, this is custom work. There's no set in stone way to do things. If there was, it would be a lot more simple. This is definitely more of a challenge. I still don't know exactly how I'm going to do this, but we're going to figure it out and we're going to work through it in this video. To kick things off here, I'm going to start with making the interface piece that will mount directly to these, and it will sit over the subwoofers and it will mount up on this on the other side. So I know I want to make an overall shape that both encompasses obviously those, but I'm also going to be using this template shape, so I want to come out to at least here with it on both sides, and that will give me some mounting surface later. You guys will see what I mean by that. So let's start by making this shape. I've got this piece here made. Now I need to start mapping out what is below it. So those two risers and then those subwoofer locations. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this over to my table over there, and then I'm gonna start taking measurements here in the trunk, and I'll transfer those to the top of this piece. As you can see, using a pencil, I've marked out the different locations. So these are those risers that I know I can secure upon. And here's the location for the subwoofers. That way I can open up the beauty panel hole around them. Now, something I know I want to do is I want to leave a little bit of room exposed in this area right here so that the amplifier rack beauty panel cover can also mount on this same riser. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut a notch into this location to allow room for that panel when I make it later. So now that I've got that shape cut out here, I need to move on to cutting the hole on the inside here for the subwoofers. And for that, I'm going to be using this shape here. This is the covert shape template from Mobile Solutions. Now, in case you guys don't have templates, I have a link up in the corner of the screen on how to kind of get started from scratch in making template shapes. With this hole being cut out, obviously now the subwoofers can fire through it. And if you're wondering why I was so careful and meticulous to make sure that I didn't ruin this middle piece, it's because I'll probably be using it later when I go to make molded metal mesh, or if I need to make any other template shapes on the inside, then I have that outside shape. So I'm going to save this piece for later. So check this out, guys. I'm really excited because I'm actually really happy with the way that this shape looks around the subwoofers. You ready for this? Check it out. That shape is going to look super sick around the outside of these subwoofers, and it might not look like much now, but I'm starting to get excited because I'm thinking a few steps ahead, and I think this is going to turn out super cool. A couple things I'm thinking about right away is I have a void of room underneath here that I can attach another layer that's this same inside shape and then this outside shape on the bottom. So that's going to give me some more thickness here. I'm thinking about doing a nice cool chamfer. I can drop that down. I'm thinking about adding a piece of acrylic around the outside here as an accented edge. Let's just start going to it. I'm going to start with making another copy of this piece because that's going to mount to the underside of that piece that we just created. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trace this to the wood, and in this case I'm going to rough cut using a jigsaw both the inside and outside. And the reason that I'm doing that is I'm going to flush trim the outside of the template on the router, but I'm not going to trim the inside of the shape until I get this piece matched up with that piece that we have already made. That way the inside perimeter is going to perfectly match up between the two pieces. So my friends, we've got both of the layers here. It's definitely a lot thicker, which is going to come in handy when we chamfer it using this bit. Now, if I flip my assembly over so far, you can see that I've also reattached that original template shape just using some template tape. And the reason I've done that is that way I can maximize the amount that this actually reaches into the wood and cuts, because I'm going to have this top bearing here riding up against this surface on the plastic template. With that chamfer added, you start to really get an idea how this is going to look. And I gotta say that chamfer adds a ton of dimension. It really gives it a lot more depth. Just because it's a 45-degree angle, it seems to make this kind of visually look much thicker than it is, even though it's only 2 layers of 1/2 inch thickness for a total of 1 inch. Because of that 45-degree angle, it looks a lot more deep. The next thing I want to do here is around the inside edge of this shape, I want to have a piece of acrylic sticking out slightly, probably like 1/4 of an inch, just to add a nice accented line. Let's take that template that we made both this inside cut and this outside cut with, and I'm going to copy that to a piece of wood. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to shrink the inside of that piece of wood slightly so that I can then use that wood as a copycat for making the acrylic. Now that I have that piece of acrylic cut, I can set it down on the table and I can put our main assembly on top of it. And here you guys can see what this will look like. So you see we have that nice sharp chamfer sticking out from underneath there. So I haven't quite figured out what I want to do with this acrylic yet, if I should light it up or if I should just paint it. It's nice that it's acrylic because unlike MDF, the paint won't soak into it, so it's really easy to give it a nice gloss finish, and that would give me a nice real crisp red line around the outside. Let me know what you guys think. Should I go with the paint or should I go with lighting it up? Now we could be done and use this panel as is and move on to the next step, but there's a few more minor details that I want to touch on and I want to take care of. First off is these hard corners. They're just kind of sharp. When you're taking this in and out of the vehicle, it's not really looking like a finished piece. I want to round these over, and then I want to add a nice round over to all of the outside perimeter on both sides. As you can see, rounding off the corners and then adding the round over on both the top and bottom side has given the panel a much more finished look. This looks nice and grabbable, if you will. That's a new term that I'm using to define when things are grab worthy within a project. But what I mean by that, you would have no problem with grabbing this and taking it out of the vehicle to service things if need be. The next thing I need to do here is I need to start planning on how some of the different materials are going to fit together. So the first thing here is I know I want to add a metal mesh inside here to protect the subwoofers, and it's going to actually mount on the back side if I flip this over of this wood here. So what I need to do is I need to cut a groove into this wood so that that metal mesh material can sit down flush with the top surface right here. That way I can then take this piece of acrylic that will sit behind the metal mesh. That way the acrylic continues to sit perfectly flush on this wood, even though the metal mesh is between the acrylic and wood. To cut this groove, I'm going to be using this 1/2-inch rabbiting bit from the Eco Tray. Guys, I can't recommend this tray enough. One of the most common questions I get from you guys is what's a good set of router bits to get started? These are really high quality, good bits, and you can do a ton with this kit. Link down in the description. If we go ahead and flip this over now, you guys can see this groove that I cut that will allow for some clearance for that metal mesh. And I forgot to mention it before, but when we wrap the vinyl that I'm going to be wrapping this surface on the front side here with, when we wrap that vinyl, it gives me somewhere to wrap it around and tuck it and then perfectly trim it. Now, what about this top side? Now, should I wrap this entire panel in vinyl on the top surface? I don't think so, because I actually am going to have a couple of different mounting locations, remember, with the fasteners that are going to go through this board and bolt down onto that standoff, and I don't want to have to deal with having to go through the vinyl for those. So I really only need to come back to about here with the vinyl around the shape, because that's the only part that you're going to see once the main board is on top and I cut out this shape into the main board. So I want to have a nice perfect edge on top here that I can cut the vinyl on. To do that, I'm going to start with sticking the template on the top surface here, and I'll show you guys the next step by step. And with that, if we look closely, you can see that I've used that router bit along with the bushing on the handheld router to create this groove. And as I explained to you guys, that allows me to wrap the vinyl around, and now I have a nice hard edge that I can trim that vinyl in and make it perfect. And it also gives me a hard edge that I will probably paint this using that Duratex coating paint, that hard black coating. That gives me a nice transition edge that I can go from the paint to the vinyl. Now, obviously I need this panel to be securely mounted in the vehicle, so I want to create some different mounting holes on this platform. I start with measuring out the location of each of the holes, and here I'm using a Forstner bit in order to get that hole started. And it's nice with a Forstner bit because that allows me to countersink the fasteners I'm going to use, but it also creates a center point that I can actually drill through with the drill bit. Once I made those holes in the panel itself, I can take it over to the vehicle and carefully align it and then transfer those holes into my standoffs. With the holes in the standoffs, I'm going to use these. These are threaded inserts. I'm going to secure them down into the wood. These wooden threaded inserts allow me to use a machine screw in order to secure my panel. That way I can take it on and off multiple times without degrading the hole. If you want to learn more about those threaded inserts, I have a whole video up in the corner of the screen. So I've got all 4 of the mounting fasteners in. 1, 2, there's 3 and then 4, and that really holds this down and makes it solid. Since the subwoofer enclosure is bolted to the vehicle, it's really nice and solid, and it's going to serve as a nice surface for me to mount that overall panel later in the project. If you guys have any questions, let me know down below. I do my best to answer them here on YouTube for you guys, or I've been doing Instagram live streams where I do question and answers. So if you want to see your question highlighted over on the live stream, don't forget to post a comment down below. Finally, don't forget to let me know what you think. Should I paint the acrylic or edge light it? Check out some of my other videos here on screen, and a special thanks goes out to John, Brian, Ali, Billy, Steve, Jerry, Emmanuel, and the rest of the Patreon membership team. If you guys would like to join that membership team, there's details about it down in the video description. As always, my friends, thank you guys for watching.